Welcome back to another episode of Spiritual Teachers Podcast. With me today is one of my best friends, who I consider one of my most prominent spiritual teachers that I've had so far. We, I learn so much from him every day, and we have many years, over almost 6 years now, of knowing each other, and we've been coworkers, we've been facilitators of men's circles together. We've just had amazing experiences and journeys together. It's such an honor to have you on today. With me today is Augie. Welcome on, Augie.
Well, hey, Guruji, great to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much, brother. It's truly a blessing to have you on at this time in particular because you're about to embark on a whole new journey, right?
Yeah. Well, each moment is a new journey, and there's definitely a chapter that's opening to something that's going more into the unknown. Yeah, so this is really cool time or a moment to be here and discuss what's occurred and then also what's ahead.
Absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about what your plan is with this next chapter?
Sure. So essentially, there was a period in life where all of a sudden the process started with waking up, giving praise and thanks to God, and then asking God how to serve. Like, God, how can this one serve? And different things would arise, and for that period, it was about 2 years ago, 2023. There was a moment where I would hear from the stillness, this body would hear, right, right. And so Augie G would sit down and start writing, and this book came through from the channel of consciousness. And the book is called Harmonic Communication. It's actually live on Medium right now, and so once it came through, the guidance was to publish it. So just published it. So it's a way of speaking and thinking and operating from harmony. At the
Mm,
beginning, at the center of all creation is harmony. And actually harmony is constantly happening. The world is moving, the earth is moving at like 55,000 miles per hour through space. And the sun is moving at like 600,000 miles per hour. And yet, wherever anyone is that's listening to this, the air is able to be breathed by everybody at the same time. Things are growing, things are dying, gravity is constant. And so there's already a state of harmony occurring. And that's the natural state of being, which is a state of peace. And there's a way to speak and think from this perspective. And so creator consciousness in the open state poured it through this vessel. So it's not mine. It's basically it's just an expression of God through writing. And then as Augie started practicing it, the world around started to become more peaceful, more harmonic, and then eventually there was an opening that happened recently where it just locked in. There was a state of peace like this. Even though there's the best way to describe it is the consciousness became the ocean.
hmm
And even though there's waves, there's little ripples and different currents, the perspective is from the depth of the ocean where it's completely still and silent and peaceful. So even happiness or sadness or bouts of anger will surface. The observer watches from a state of peace and is still experiencing it and yet doesn't become it. So typically what can happen is someone will say like, I'm angry and I'm frustrated. And yet those are none of those things are true. The body is experiencing anger. The body is experiencing frustration.
Hmm.
The individual is I am.
Right.
So the what it started to occur was the things that were the whole world that this one had been going through. There was a lot of seeking to, and basically all of the seeking came to this moment of accessing this state of peace, and the seeking stopped. And the realization was that everything that had been created prior to that was from the mind and the ego attempting to liberate itself, which is such a funny paradox, because it wants to maintain itself, but also the suffering propels an individual into liberation. Each being is, as far as Augie can tell, is on their way to awakening. So the natural state is enlightenment. The natural state is Buddha nature, Christ consciousness, Krishna consciousness, and it's all just happening in divine flow. It's perfect. It's beautiful. So like a flower is opening in the field, and the rest of the flowers are like, "Whoa, that's possible." And so then the rest of the flowers naturally do it. Even if they're not, it's not in their awareness, the pole is the same. So the pole that like a flower moves towards the sun, that's not, the flower isn't saying, I want to move to the sun. It's part of nature, then it's a natural flow. So this is what's occurring on the planet specifically at this time is a massive blooming effect, and then each flower or each human is like a snowflake, and their expression is beautifully unique to that self, and it actually is sort of like a kaleidoscope. So it
Hmm.
can continue to express and continue to adapt. The vision is like the thousand petal lotus at the crown chakra. It is like a kaleidoscope where flowers bloom, and it's indwelling on itself, and so it has more and more expressions depending on the frequency that each being attains and then holds. So the next step was, or the next step is coming, is essentially a death to the material world. So in the East, it's called sannyasi, which is like a renunciate. And renunciate to the world just means renunciation to the world of mind, or renunciation to the world of Maya. And then and Christ talked about it is like dying and being reborn. So dying and then being reborn of the spirit. So this is essentially what's occurring. Frankly, that's what's going on. So everything has now left. Everything as far as work, um, basically any sort of social identities and things like that are going into a place of dormancy and retiring and sleeping. And then what's awakening is something that's really unknown. It's a new frontier for Augie. And so there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of excitement. It's the vision that being held is like a caterpillar that's like, okay, it's time to go into cocoon, without really knowing what's on the other side, and just trusting that the flow of the universe is relaxing into it and saying, this is the direction that the creator, the intelligent infinity is propelling this one to go. So onward and upward. And
Into the
so yeah, that's
unknown.
that's what's happening. Yeah, it's and that's it. That's it. So yeah, thanks for the question, and thanks for giving an opportunity for that to be spoken.
Absolutely, brother. So this is a really beautiful space that you're in. Your energy feels really good to me, and I'd love to hear about how you got to this place, how it all started for you, uh, where, what teachings, what teachers you had along the way. I know you've done a lot of travel through the world. I know you had some really fun and exciting chapters in your life, so I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Sure. So up until 25, this body identified as Gus, and that actually it was up until 30. But the awakening, the main awakening that happened, it was a moment. There was a moment of awakening. There's been several of those, but there was one very specific one, and so that life was all basically the conditioned life. So it was a complete life of mind and ego, and it was basically about playing soccer, chasing women, fighting, drugs and alcohol, and it was a lot of separation consciousness. And then eventually, what occurred is the body started to deteriorate. There was no way to sustain that type of life, and at the time, all Augie cared about was playing soccer, and the body was starting to falter. So a doctor said, well, you're not going to be able to do anything when you if you don't start stretching. And really, the mentality at the time was like, I don't want to stretch, and this sucks. And it was very negative, and like it was a victim started consciousness, and then but at the same time, it was saying, well, I want to play soccer.
Hmm.
So then it was like, well, I'm not going to just sit around and just stretch 40 minutes a day. I'll go find yoga. I'll go do yoga. But yoga was like, frankly, the word at the time that Augie used was gay. It was like a derogatory approach to yoga, and the only thing that it wanted to do was it was just watching it from an egoic standpoint. So eventually found a very competitive yoga style that fit the nature that was operating at that time. And in the state of sitting in laying in shavasana, all of a sudden this awakening started to happen, but with no idea that that was what was going on. And so, and it was weird. So I remember there was this, there was this opening around the third eye, which third eye I didn't even know what that was.
Hmm.
And then one day the yoga teacher says, go into shavasana 4 days in a row with and stay until you're the last one in class, until
Mm.
you realize you're the. And that was like a challenge because I remember expressing to her something weird is happening in Shavasana. I can't really explain it, but I had never really laid with myself or meditated. Meditating wasn't a part of my program. So then all of a sudden, the fourth day occurred, 4 days straight, and though it was beautiful at the third eye center, this amazing indigo purple light emerged. It was just such a relaxing, blissful experience. And there was a deep knowing that that was actually me, that that was also part of God, and there was no separation. It just happened like that. And before then, I didn't believe in God. Wasn't into religion, wasn't really. I thought like spiritual people were kooky and weird. So, and then once that happened, I was like, I believe in God. God's real. And then very soon after that, I was invited by who ended up becoming a pretty big spiritual teacher for me, Sean McCormick, to go into a float tank. And this was like a
Mm.
week later.
Okay.
And so I'm in a float tank now a week later, which before this, I was like, no way would I do this. But now I was thinking, okay, I can lay in silence for an hour, and I just wanted to go as a ride. Like it's like when can we ever be weightless unless we're in the Dead Sea or in outer space?
Hmm.
So I went in there and I'm laying there, and about 20, 30 minutes in, and I'm naked. I've got like earplugs in and the doors closed, totally pitch black. These green, beautiful iridescent lights start to show up, or again around the third eye space. And then all of a sudden I heard a young man's voice, like a 20-year-old man's voice. It was like, "Hey," like very loud.
Whoa.
There was
Okay.
there was no mistaking.
Right.
So, and I'm like, wait a second, someone's in this room. So I wait. What the heck? And I open the tank up, and the door's locked, and the lights are out, and no one's in the room. And then I attempted to go back in and rest, but it was just such a jarring experience. It didn't feel evil or bad or anything. It just didn't seem possible. So then I left. I got outside and I talked to the owner. I said, "Hey man, did you go in there?" And he said, "No, I didn't go in there." I go, "Well, I heard this really loud hey."
Hmm.
Like it was a man's voice. I mean, it was unmistakable. I was awake. I wasn't asleep. And he said, "Hey man, I don't sound weird or anything, but that probably was one of your spirit guides. Like
Oh,
you've
wow.
maybe never been that still before."
Mm.
And yeah, so and that did sound weird, but it also made sense to me because I had never been that still before. Like in a float tank, it's accessible to get into like theta state while awake, which most only like very usually not only but usually only like very accomplished meditators can get in that state, and it could take like a long time to be able to stay awake while in that state of consciousness while meditating. So this is like an acceleration point to be able to get to that place. And then I left that place and nothing was really the same. Like there was no going back from there. The way that I could hear had shifted, the way that I could see had shifted. This my sensory abilities were totally different, and all of a sudden I could sense and feel and see energies,
Mm.
which had never. I remember walking out being like, "What the hell?" I was like I was in some kind of weird dream, but I was just basically in a new reality where even now, like the light was just so much more crystalline, and I could hear every single whereas outdoor sounds were just like one sound. I could hear each sound. I could hear the trees. I could hear the branches in the trees and the leaves. Each leaf. I could hear the car and the tires on the road. So it was very clear. And then from there, I had all kinds of negative entities and even like one demonic energy that was in my living space that I was completely unaware of until this happened. And then when I
Wow.
went home, I became aware of it, and then that really was the start of the journey because at that point, so there was the first awakening where I realized God as exists, and I hadn't realized it, but it was like, wow, God's real. The second one was, oh my gosh, all my sensory organs started to open. And then it was a matter of like, okay, what do I do now? Like
Mm.
how do I go through life with this, because there's no going back. At first I was a little bit upset and even like angry. I thought something had, and there was no going back. And then how do I deal with negative entities and these so then that became like I was basically a spiritual neophyte at that point. I was 25 years old, and I'm like calling the spiritual shop saying, "Hey, I need some help." And they're going down and they're like, "Okay, well, this is smudge, and this is how you use smudge, and this is how you, and this is." It was like so brand new Palo Santo. I didn't know any of this stuff was. I didn't know this world at all. It was completely foreign to me because I was basically like to use like an archetype of someone in society. I was essentially like a jock bro,
Hmm.
and they had it was essentially that thought that whole world was weird, and now all of a sudden that's part of my existence.
Right.
Yeah, and then soon after that, so that became a process of integrating and learning how to clear energies and take care of the space, and then all of a sudden teachers started to show up. More and
Mm.
more teachers started to show up into the field because my frequency had shifted
Exactly.
and I was receptive to learning. And so then I met with the owner of the float tank again soon after that. Wasn't that long after. Um, it was probably like 6 months later. And in that 6 month period of time, this expression started to come out that was happening as a form of this wizard character. It was
Mm.
like this, and I didn't even know what it was. It was just sort of happening. I would get that Halloween. I dressed up as this scarf man character that was actually inspired by an actual scarf man in Seattle.
Mm.
And then something opened for me, like this childlike exuberance flowered that I hadn't really had access to since I was a little kid. And it just didn't end. Like Halloween happened and I kept going. Like I kept finding reasons to put the outfit on, and then pretty soon I was like out. And then my dad invented these little cards. They're pop-up cards that have inspirational
Oh,
thoughts in
I
them.
didn't
And I,
realize your dad created those.
yeah, he invented those. Yeah,
Oh, amazing.
yeah. So he invented it in the year that I was born in 1983, and then I had this box of them that I just saved, and I just really couldn't throw them away. So they were in my closet, and so they're like antique cards and they're cool. So I started handing those out when I was dressed as the Love Wizard.
And
And
there's a message in each card, right? There's a
right,
specific message that's different in each card, right?
yeah, there can be some duplicates, but generally speaking, there's a so many different sayings inside of them.
And they're very positive and uplifting and they're to kind of make somebody's day a little better by reading it, right?
That's right. Yeah. So I had those, and then so I started handing them out because
Mm-hmm.
I had like thousands of them, and so
Mm-hmm.
I just started handing them out, and then, but at the same time, I'm working like a corporate job, so I'm in like a cubicle in a building, wearing a suit, and I'm doing the best I can with the world because now all of a sudden the senses are really. I was already a pretty empathic person, but now I was on a whole nother level. And so at that time, I was still struggling with alcohol and different, like, just abuse of of drugs and alcohol still, and and that was just part of the deal. And I was also practicing yoga a lot. I was chasing that. I just want to be with God again. I want to be with God. So I would go to yoga class just to get into shavasana and be like, oh, there it is.
Mm.
But not really meditating so much. But so I'm still like young, and I meet up with this guy who's started a new coaching business who happens to own the float tank business, and he's like, "Hey, I'll give you a free session." Cool. So I meet him at this Starbucks in Bellevue. I get there. He walks in, sits down, and he goes. The first question he asked me is, he says, "If you had an unlimited amount of money and you could give one service to the world, would you be, or what would you
Mm.
do?" And I was like, well, bro, I sat there. It didn't take long. I was like, honestly, man, I would just dress up as a love wizard and run around the world handing out these cards to people.
Wow.
And he goes, then you must. And he got up and he walked out. That was the whole meeting.
Wow.
And I was like,
That's powerful.
holy crap. You know, I'm sitting there, and it felt like such a truth. And even I was shocked that it came out of my mouth, but that felt like the honest answer. So I I was sitting there, I was doing my normal routine. I'm in this like high rise condo, and I'm like, I don't care about any of these things here, and I'm doing this job, and I don't really care about this job. And there was no way to irk this. There was no way to shake that something in me was calling to dress up as a love wizard and run around the world handing out these cards and spreading love and light to people. It was just so strong. And it sounded crazy because at the time I'm 31 years old, and most people are getting married and having kids and settling down, and what's calling me is to leave work and go on this wild mission.
Hmm.
So at this also, these different women started coming into my life that I had never really interacted with before because they were on the spiritual side.
Hmm.
And God has such a beautiful way to instill attraction so that the opposite sexes or the same sexes and can then there's a pull for learning.
Hmm.
So there was this woman that was going to India at this time, and she was like, "Why don't you come with me to India?" I'm like,
Hmm.
"Oh my gosh, I can't go to India." I remember coming to these ideas. No, I can't. And then she was like, "Why?" Well, and I didn't have a good excuse. I had no excuse. I had plenty of of vacation time, money. And I was like, "Shoot, okay." So I went with her to India for 10 days, and that on there was also some like health stuff that came through where the my naturopath doctor had figured out a way to heal the candida that was in my gut, and in that process she was like, look, the best possible thing you could do is move. Like, your body wants to be in the sun and in the desert climate. Like, okay. And then I met this woman. We went to India and we were on the beach and doing yoga and making love, and it was like whoa, this is a whole this and really diving into spiritual realms that I wasn't aware of. Like just being in India as a spiritual teacher, they just go there and walk and breathe the air. That's it. So I got back and I was like, that's it. Left my job and I was like, it's time. I'm gonna do this mission.
Mm,
This is what is meant to be done. So I came back and started packing, getting rid of all my things, and then went on the mission. And the mission, it actually from the minute that it started, which was when I left Washington State, was when I was 32 or 31 years old. It took I completed in when I was 34, so it took 3 years.
hmm
There was a lot of prep to go into it. There was a lot of practice, but that led into going to Burning Man, which was a huge opening, and then it led to going living in California, which once one got to California, it was like hitting the spiritual highway. It was like I was on like kind of the country road. I was like, okay, and then especially the LA area is like an epicenter of spirituality in the world
hmm
and in its own way. So got there, all of a sudden met another woman who took me under her wing, and then all these things opened. Well, all of a sudden was working with crystals, and then Kundalini yoga came in really strong, which
So before
was
that, you weren't practicing Kundalini yoga?
no, so the Wizard mission carried me to Burning Man, then down to LA, and then once I got to LA, I found this crystal, and I was like, whoa! And this crystal started guiding me, and it guided me to this guy, who then guided me to this retreat, and in the retreat, I met the woman. I remember seeing her. It was crazy. I'm standing on a hill, and I see this woman, and I can see her aura, and she looks like way taller than everyone else. She's just beaming light.
Wow.
It was such a strong light that like I didn't even think about it. Like my body started walking towards this person,
hmm
and I was like, "Who? What is going on?" And I walked into the cafeteria. She's standing there, and I was like, "I've never met her before." I go, "What's happening? Like you're like glowing."
hmm
I had not seen an aura like this before. At the time, I'm still learning about all this, but that's what it was. Is her aura was really expanded, and she goes Kundalini, and I'm like, what the heck is that?
Right.
Like, I want to do that. And she's like Kundalini and vegan food,
Uh-huh.
Kundalini and vegan food. And at the time, like being vegan was like way a stretch for
hmm
me. So I left the retreat and I was like, I gotta try this Kundalini stuff out. And I I started doing the Kundalini, and then the Kundalini, I ended up going to White Tantra practice,
hmm We
which
talked about that
I know you've
in the last episode, actually.
yeah. So the first White Tantra was with this woman that I had met, and because White Tantra is typically with a female and a male partner, and
hmm
it's a work in the polarity. So it's the work in the polarity of the masculine and feminine for long durations of time. So it was something like I want to say 6 hours of sitting meditation, doing really. You've done White Tantra, right,
Yeah.
Peter?
Yeah, 3 times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So at the end of that, it was a massive ego death. Like it was
hmm
really intense, and the aspects of the self that were fading. The unconscious and the ego stuff was fading, and I remember thinking, Kundalini yoga, people are crazy. This is a cult. Like I'm never doing this again, and it went way down into this like alcoholic bender binge with drugs, and it was basically the darkness was like uh over because so much light had poured through. The darkness was attempting to counteract it,
hmm
and the darkness basically suffocated itself. And this is generally how darkness works: is it cannibalizes itself, and then eventually the light emerges.
Can we talk a little bit
uh
about that? How did it
sure.
cannibalize itself in that moment?
So the path of separation is unsatiable. It can't be satiated.
hmm
So the more depraved it gets, and the one thing that is that there's nothing wrong or bad about it. It's just a path. It's a path. It's still part of the creator, and all is redeemed. So everything is reconciled in the higher densities. In the lower densities, there's an opportunity specifically, and these teachings come from the teachings of Ra, which we haven't got there yet, but that's a the law of one and the Ra teachings is probably the I think it's probably the most important, especially also with the teachings of the way of mastery from Yeshua. That those two books are bodies of work are the most influential on the current way of operating and seeing the world that Augie is experiencing. So essentially, in the third density, which Earth again, these are teachings from I'm recapitulating.
Mm-hmm.
The the density of Earth was in third density until about 2012 when it started when it fully shifted to fourth, and the full shift really was like predominantly fourth. There's a merging period where it's basically third slash fourth density for a period of time. It's not very long in the scheme because third density was 25 to 26,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then now it's in fourth density. That period of time, each being that incarnated goes through successive incarnations until they choose. And the choice is so this is the free will choice to choose the path of separation, which is the path of like the quintessentially like the elites, um, greed, manipulation, essentially basically anything that has to do with aggrandizing the self, the personal self, the ego. And then
Mm-hmm.
the other path is the service of the whole. So this is anyone who these are like the saints of the world, the Jesuses, the Buddhas, Mother
Service to
Marys,
others, right?
service to others. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and so each being gets to choose. So at the same time, those aspects are not separate from the being. So then it becomes a purification process because in the choosing, those things are still alive. So what was happening in this vessel was the choice was already made, and there was some karmic things. So the each time that one um, starts to go in the path of not, which is the path of separation, and yet the truth, the path of truth, which is the path with is then defied or blocked a little bit. This is where karmic patterns start to happen until the being recognizes, this is a pattern of
Mm-hmm.
suffering,
Mm-hmm.
of inflicting pain and then getting the pain back. And then the being says, uh, I choose to forgive, and I choose to write a new story into the path of Dharma and the path of truth. So essentially, what had happened with the white chanter is so much light and love had poured into the system that the darkness inside was retaliating.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue with the more that one seeks the light, the more capacity they can hold for light, the more peace and love and harmony that the being experiences.
Mm-hmm.
The more one seeks the darkness, which is like things like debt or killing, raping, drug addiction, and the basically it can't satiate itself. It has to get more and more depraved. It needs more drugs. It needs more violence. It needs more separation
Mm-hmm.
until eventually it just is so separate and isolated that it's in its own hell. It's created its own hell universe.
And
Um,
sometimes that leads to an awakening.
Right, and that's what's so beautiful is that the suffering actually leads to the awakening. So at that point, when I basically hit a bottom in that time, and there was no other way other than to purify. It was like it was wanting to purify. So then it swung back into the light again, and this is really common where lightness and darkness will swing and the swings become less violent or less intense as it starts to spiral upwards towards its natural alignment.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean it's not intense. It's just that it just becomes more and more aligned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that happened, and then I ended up. going back the other way and going back into the Kundalini practice after because the ego starts dying, friends, different things, associations start to go away, which is like that's who it thinks it is,
Mm-hmm.
and it starts to align with more of the light and love, which is like its natural state.
Mm-hmm.
But the ego doesn't like to give up without a fight. So from there, the journey actually really went full steam. So uh, the act I actually took off. So there was a mission started to unfold. Celestial communication started to come in. Being able to have access to angels and um, ascended master teachings, clairvoyant ability started to come online. And then I ended up leaving on the mission, like the full mission. So the first mission was leave Washington, get down to California, and then from there was preparing, and then I actually went. So that led me to 24 countries around the world,
Wow.
dressed as a love wizard, and predominantly going to the awakened places on the planet. So, well, maybe that's not the right term. It's more the epicenters of transformation.
Mm-hmm.
So, went all the way through Central America, seeking yoga communities, spiritual communities, working with different spiritual teachers, and dressing as a wizard, love wizard. And then on my 33rd birthday, ended up in Pisac, Peru, drinking ayahuasca for the first time.
Wow.
Yeah, and then it was a full moon with Diego Palma, and that was the battle again of eradicating the spirit of alcohol in the system. So
Mm.
before that, it was a battle of there was I would be considered an alcoholic, and then drinking 4 times down there. That
Ayahuasca.
Yeah, she rinsed it. She was like, "Oh, this is gone now." Just took
Mm.
care of the spirit that was working through. And then the other thing that occurred is the second time I drank ayahuasca there, Jesus arrived.
Wow.
Jesus showed up in the room. And he said, "When you're done with this, I am here."
Oh, wow.
And
I'm
there
getting chills
was,
just hearing that.
yeah. So prior to that, he had come into my life more strong because I was a muse of a woman down in California. So when I arrived to California, this spiritual teacher took me under her wing and basically was just showing me the ropes. Here's the stuff that I didn't even know existed. All these wizards and alchemists were showing, oh, whoa, this is wild. And she was very much connected to Christ, to Jesus, to Christ.
And
So I
this was the
started to pray.
Kundalini. This was the Kundalini yogi.
No, no. So the Kundalini yogi, she got me into Kundalini yoga, and then another woman down there, absolutely beautiful, amazing woman. Her name is Dottie. And she was the one that started to introduce me to like all these abstract spiritual concepts and ideas that didn't even know existed. And so we just went on this spiritual journey together, this ride.
Mm-hmm.
And she loved Jesus. She had grown up in the Bible Belt, from Georgia, in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And so she started really teaching me about Jesus. And she was teaching me in this way where it was like non dogmatic. It
Mm-hmm.
was just like where I could start to form a relationship with Christ that was personal. And so he started to come into my life. I started to pray to him and started to have a relationship with him. And then when I went down to Peru, he actually literally showed up
Wow.
and he's standing there and I can see him. And I'm like, and when I left that ceremony, I remember writing in my journal, I saw Jesus, he is the way.
Mm.
So now I start, he's like, when you're done with this, I'm ready. And I'm like, man, I just got started. This is the most amazing thing ever. Like I was so, I like all the medicine work it was all new and it was a fantastic. I loved it. I would loved drinking medicine. And so that all of a sudden came on board, and the mission kept going. So I went through 24 countries around the world. So I went through Central America, South America, Africa, Asia, Australia. I was Yeah, that came to a completion. But that service mission was essentially like the awakening, an awakening mission. It was like a karma yoga type mission, and that exposed me to kirtan and to Hinduism and Buddhism and all these different belief systems. And then when I came back, then that I was in LA, and then became aware of the law of one with
Okay.
Rocky. And
Okay, so before we dive into that,
yeah,
how did you know the mission was complete?
so there was a download that happened that was a full yes download. It was like, this is what's happening. And there is a teaching. It's in several. It's in different books actually. The Mormons actually teach this too. That there's 144,000 beings of light that are coming to the planet to help the transition. So at the time, it was basically 144,000 awakened beings will then that creates a singularity moment where once that occurs, that the vibrational field created by all of those beings will actually pull the entire earth into automatic alignment, in which now is what's called fourth density consciousness, which is the consciousness of love and understanding. And at the there was I was at the Seattle or the Los Angeles Expo, Conscious Life Expo, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, I think I was there that year. What year was that?
It was 2017, I think 2017,
Okay, I think I went
right
in
before.
2018.
Yeah, it was right before I went on the mission. This is
Okay.
really cool to talk about actually. Where this came through, it was 144,000. It was like 144,000. Okay, and I had this moment where I remembered where I remember being recruited to come to Earth to
Wow.
help with this mission. Where I was on a different planet, and the higher self met with Sanat Kumara, and Sanat Kumara is a prophet of Venus who was essentially like the steward of the consciousness of Earth. It's like the master gardener. Well, I was more of like one of the teachers, one of the protectors, the guardians.
Hmm.
And so I was at the Conscious Life Expo, and I see this image of this guy, and I'm like, whoa, and I just feel drawn to it. And I go to this booth, and it's these people who this woman, she channels Sanat Kumara. So the image is Sanat
Mm.
Kumara. I'm like, whoa, okay. Uh, and then it came through like 144,000. So I had 6,000 cards, and 6,000 times 24 is 144,000. So it was like, okay, I'm going to give out 6,000 cards in 24 countries around the world. And then this whole path aligned. It was like following basically where the coconuts grow in this region.
Wow.
So yeah, and then that was also when I met Iran, and Iran became quintessential. I met him that day after where that all locked in, and I remember talking to him about we were in this like little garage in the back with people from the LA conscious community. We were just sitting in a circle chatting, and he said, and I remember being like, man, it just feels like that's the number, and he just something about his encouragement just said, then that's a number. Quit thinking about it. I'm like, okay, because I was going back and forth, how many countries, how long does this go, and then it locked in. So then I went, and in Tokyo, 2020. Well, it was like, so it would have been 20, how old? Jeez. Well, it was when I was 35, so 34, and I'm 41. So 7 years ago,
Hmm.
it was when I handed out the final card. I kept track the best that I could, and it was like, all right, it's done. And when I left, I was on the plane, and it was an 8-hour flight. The what was repeating, I listened to this one Parangi song at the time over and over on repeat, and the whole time was the word. It was the words were speaking me. It was highest vibration, highest vibration, highest vibration, highest vibration. Essentially, what clicked in at the moment that that last card was set was that the 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 purpose of the existence is to attain the highest state of consciousness possible in the while in the body,
Mm-hmm.
the highest vibration. So that'd be it's just, highest vibration is synonymous with consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And then so that opened a new mission, which was how does one attain a very high vibration?
Mm-hmm.
And that catapulted me deep into Kundalini yoga, way
Mm.
deep. I felt like, okay, I'm meant to teach. At one point in LA, I went to a class with Guru Singh. I sat down in the back. He started singing, I am that I am, and that is that. And I just broke down in tears and I was like, this is who I'm going to learn from, this teacher, Guru Singh. And so I got back from my mission, moved to Los Angeles and started studying to become a Kundalini yoga teacher.
And that was a 9-month program.
Yeah, it was a 9 month program, but it really was a year and a half in order to get everything done.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a complete immersion into Kundalini yoga. At the same time, I had become, this was just super random. Like at the moment that I started my wizard mission, I was in debt. I was like $20,000 in debt. And I'm like, I need $20,000 to do this mission. And so, but I knew it was a mission that it was meant to go on. So I knew that I had this gone through an activation where I knew that I had an unlimited amount of money to do the will of God. I knew
Mm-hmm.
it. I knew that doing whatever the will of God is, the truth that's resonating from the heart space, that all things would move to align. So as soon as I locked in that deep knowing and started operating from a frequency of like this money exists because this is what the higher self, the God, Guru, the truth in me has called me to do. So it was amazing. All of a sudden, and I had set down a number and the date. So I
You
had set
wrote it
down
down?
$20,000. I wrote down the date and I was like, this is my mission. This is my karma life. This is my mission. This is what I'm supposed to do. And these are the funds that are necessary in order to do this to help serve. So by the time I left, I was out of debt and I had $16,000.
Wow.
And so all these things moved. I got a better job. It was an amazing job in California, so I could be near the beach, and which was better for my health, which the naturopath doctor had told me, and I could live more like how I lived in India, which I really enjoyed. And also I was learning from these amazing spiritual teachers. And so then everything became directed towards this mission. And
Mm-hmm.
then the money showed up. When I was in Bali, I was halfway done with the mission. And I'm like, I'm out of money. What am I going to do? So I sat down and I did what's called a Ben Franklin close.
I
I,
haven't heard of
I drew a
that.
line to a piece of paper. And on one side, I wrote one opportunity. On the other side, I wrote one opportunity. So the one side was, okay, when I was in Peru, I had received this message to take the skills I had learned in Amazon's because I had learned how to become a really talented Amazon, like at selling things on Amazon,
Oh,
and
okay.
use those skills for good. So use those
Mm-hmm.
skills for good and start a media company called Light Warrior Media and start to help health and wellness companies get their products out to the world that elevate consciousness through Amazon. So that came through in California and then really solidified in Peru when I was down there working with the medicine. And so I'm in Bali and I'm out of money. And I'm like, okay, well, it's time to go back to work. Um, but I still have this mission because I'm halfway done with the mission. So how's this going to work? I would need like some job that's remote and I wasn't selling myself short. I was in the abundance mindset, like this is all possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote down one side, I was like, okay, I could start my company and I'll start getting clients and I'll have the freedom. It was like, or I can get a job that pays really, really well, has great benefits, and I can start my agency at the same time, and I can still do my wizard mission. I'm like, that's it. So I circle it. I've got my American phone with me, It's in my pocket. I walk outside. I'm in sort of a remote part of Bali. It was still popular, but like not. And so it's sort of vacant on the street. I'm in this dusty street, and I look down at the beach, and all of a sudden, oh, before I went out, I reached up to my angels and I said, "That's it, guys. Help! Like I'm ready. Like help me out." And I walk outside, and my phone rings, and it's my old boss. Is a boss that I'd had before I went on my wizard mission,
Hmm.
and he's like, "Hey, how soon can you get to San Jose, California?" And I'm like, "I'm in Bali, Indonesia, and I still have
Right.
got two more countries left on my." He doesn't know, or he has no idea where I'm at. I go, "Well, I'm here in Bali. I'm going to Australia and then New Zealand, and then I'll be home. I mean, I could come around like at the end of November." And he goes, "Okay, great. Well, we have this awesome job for you." And it was basically the best. He goes, and we all know you're a wizard, and it's a high, and I'm like, wow. He says, so you can still do your wizard mission, and you can come work here. I'm like, okay,
Whoa.
most high paying job I'd ever received, like very high paying. Like, whoa, I didn't like I had never made this type of money before, and it was a supplement company, Nordic Naturals.
Hmm.
And I go to so I show up there after I finish that point. I'm wearing like a suit, and I go to work for 2 days a week, and the rest of the time of the week I'm doing my mission. So I'm like there for 2 weeks, and then and this is before working remote was like really popular. But I was flying to work from Los Angeles to San Jose. So, but everything's around gearing towards completing the mission. Like, okay, I'm a love wizard, but while I'm here, I just go to work and wear a suit, and then on the weekends, I'm a love wizard and I'm going on traveling.
Hmm.
So, I flew once to Africa for 2 weeks. Um, Went to 5 countries in 2 weeks, did all the handing out the cards, and then went back and was still working while there, and then went back to work.
Wow.
So and I got pretty good at that. Um, yeah, and
You
then
didn't reach burnout at all with that?
oh, it was really challenging. There was a lot of times where it was really challenging. There was one moment where I was going through quite a significant. Uh, there was lots of moments where I would just drop down in prayer, or I would lose. I remember there was one time when I was in Lake Titicaca, and this was the end of the first half of the mission, and I'm exhausted. I'm by myself. I'm doing this traveling by myself, and I'm traveling pretty quickly. I was intuitively going where to go. So there's a lot of people who are on the earth who are receiving intuitive guidance to go to certain places with no reason why. They may even be like, for some reason, I'm supposed to go in this department store.
Hmm.
And the thing is each being is a crystallized being, and they're likely doing grid work. So they're helping to harmonize the grid of the earth with the frequency that's in that they hold, that they carry,
Just in their body.
right? Just in their body. And so I was doing grid work. This was my assignment. I'm like going around, and it would be like stand here, like okay. And I say it's like consciousness, the in streaming flow of consciousness into the vessel, like the light and love of the celestial realms is coming through, and a communication that's a deep knowing. It's like this is known, it's felt.
Hmm.
And so I was doing grid work all over the place. Just and especially when I was the wizard, there would be like I would dress up, and then it would say, "Okay, this is your path," and then I go, "Okay, cool," and I would just run, and I would resonate love. Every single person that I came across, the attempt was to say, "I love you," like in the thought, like I love you." So that was what was going on, was this grid work, but I would get exhausted. I'm in Lake Titicaca, I'm sitting in Island de la Luna, and I'm totally beat, and I'm just feeling depleted, and I just was like in prayer just saying I really really need some help. Like I'm tired, I'm lonely, like parts of my heart are broken. And I look up, and these beautiful cloud beings appear. Like I'm not on any medicines or anything. I'm just in consciousness meditation, and that's just myself. Like there's no one around me. I'm on this little tiny island in the middle of Lake Titicaca called Island Limit, and they just start cheering me on. You're doing so great. Like we're so proud of you. These like celestial, like angelic beings, and there's a whole circle of them. And then they said it's okay to take breaks. it's okay to take a break. And it's okay to this wasn't something they said, but telepathically they were like, it's okay to bring people with you now. Like the first part of
Mm,
the alone, and the second part of the mission, I was with people. So people came with me, which was really nice. I
mm,
was with people the whole time.
mhm.
Um, yeah, and that was how I ended up in LA, and then I get this job and so forth. And yeah,
Well,
so
I,
that
I I have a question about Lake Titicaca. I know that that's one of the most active locations for extraterrestrials, and from a lot of documentaries I've watched, there's actually ships and vessels coming out of the lake that a lot of people see, and there's different beings. Did you encounter any of those stories or communicate or see anything like that when you were there?
well, I think I've been to something like 40, 50 countries in the world. The most peaceful place I've ever been on the planet is Island de la Luna, Lake Titicaca, where I was sitting and received that transmission. And I personally saw um, there was a opening in the sky where these cloud like angelic beings spoke to me.
Hmm.
While I was there, I was told about a place called I want to say it's called the Portal of Illumination, and it's actually on del Sol, Isla del Sol, the island of the sun.
Hmm.
And that apparently is a place where the ascended masters appear on Earth.
Oh
It's
wow.
some for them to transport to that location, and they actually physically appear. I wasn't able to go because there was a conflict on the island at the time, but I got as close to it as I could to receive any sort of transmission there that I could. Um, yeah, and then I also was told that the birth of the Incan civilization was there, which was it seems to be um, a fairly enlightened civilization that was worshiping the sun.
Hmm.
But yeah, that resonates with me that could be happening there. It's a very, very special place.
It is considered the sacral chakra of the planet, I believe, as
Cool.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I recommend going there. Yeah, and then in relation to your question before, when I was going to, there was a period of time with in LA where it made sense after becoming a Kundalini yoga teacher just to become that. Like it didn't make it, and so part of the Kundalini yoga teacher attire is white, wearing all white and a turban.
Hmm.
And there was I was also working quite a bit with the plant medicines this time, especially ayahuasca. So and there was a conflict because some of the ayahuasqueros were telling me that it was dangerous to be practicing Kundalini yoga and using the medicine at the same time because too much of the Kundalini can rise. And then also the Kundalini yogis were opposed to using plant medicine.
Hmm.
And I'm doing both. I'm doing lots of Kundalini yoga and I'm using plant medicine. And this feels like a yes to me. So yeah, there was one ceremony where I went in and asked permission from all of the gurus, like the ones that had passed, and they arrived and they said, "For you, this is alive. This is a line for you to be using working these paths simultaneously." So I
Mm.
started working the shamanic path and the Kundalini yoga path at the same time. And then and at the same time, I'm really developing a personal relationship with Christ, Jesus.
Hmm.
So one day I'm sitting there. All of a sudden, I become the director of e-commerce at Nordic Naturals, and I'm making absurd amount of money, and um, I'm seeking the highest vibration possible in to attain. And I'm in a plant ceremony, and all of a sudden the shaman starts speaking channeled words from Yeshua, from Jesus.
Oh wow.
And in that process, I went through an invocation of Christ consciousness. Like I asked to know and to receive and to feel Christ consciousness. The amount of love, the capacity of that awareness was so intense that I just started purging intensely.
Hmm.
But after, and all these things started to align, it's like, wow, it became overwhelming to consider what it would take in order to reach a state of unconditional love that Jesus was in, that he emanated. And yet that felt really true and still feels true. Like the most aligned thing to do is to align into the highest frequency of unconditional love possible. After that ceremony, that became the focal point. Was is to it basically a curriculum was received in that moment that said like this is the path forward. And I ended up going to the beach that day and um, taking a sacred bath in the ocean and baptizing myself into the path of Christ consciousness.
That's
And
beautiful, man. And do you remember what he said when he was channeling? Do you remember any of the words he was saying?
not at all. I don't
Okay.
remember one thing, but I do. But what I do remember was the frequency. It was the
Mm,
frequency in the room, the what was happening in my body, the love and light was so great that it was there was no way to contain it, and
hmm
I touched it for a moment, and I do think that the plants and the like all the plants that are available that help people get to that state of universal love, they're mainly to plant a seed in consciousness that like, hey, there you are, that's you. And then it's like, oh, and where what generally happens is that they're like, oh, well, then it becomes a chase to get it again, right? Oh, I want
Right.
to feel when what eventually occurs is that that just becomes the natural state of being. And so the plants are really beautiful to help because the world is operating in a lot of ways in separation consciousness, and that it can basically start to train the mind to feel like it's separate,
hmm
and actually not the mind, the whole body mind by spirit complex, and the connection between the mind and the heart becomes fragmented or severed, and the plants help to um, take away the veil, and then the being then drops into the heart, and they're like, ah, there I am. So it's like a resuscitation device. It's like, hey, get back into your heart,
hmm
or and then people can go operate in the world with that deep knowing at plant. Once truth is felt, once it's heard, there's no going back. It's a known
Absolutely.
thing.
hmm
Yeah. So that's it. Planted that seed, and then I had another really intense death where the world of like being a corporate person was dying. That wasn't going to work anymore. More friends and family members leaving because the vibration field was moving up, and their vibrational field was not, or moving in a different direction. And so there's a natural, just it's basically like moving to a new pasture and at a higher ground on the mountain, and the people below they don't have the capacity to get there yet. And it's not that it's better or worse, it's just that's just how it works.
hmm
So
I
I'm
like I
what
like the way you phrase that.
yeah, because everyone's going to the same place anyway at the same time. There's no separation. It's an infinite cycle of death and rebirth, and it's very funny. So the yeah, so then I remember I was sitting in this like mansion that I was living in when I was working up there, and I'm like, in this thing by myself, and I'm totally lost. I mean, basically, what was happening is the consciousness that was operating before was dying, and this new consciousness was birthing,
hmm
and it's in this in between space. And the in between space for anyone who's going through this is so it can be very, very, very challenging. Like it's almost unbearable. And it's also one of the most beautiful times because it brings people to their knees in prayer. Like,
hmm
I need help. Please, God, help me. I was in that state and I was praying and crying on the floor for hours. And then all of a sudden, just calling to Jesus, calling to the angels, calling to God. So, and I hear this repeating, Sudarshan Chakra Kriya, Sudarshan Chakra Kriya, Sudarshan Chakra Kriya.
Mm.
And I didn't really know this Kriya. Like I couldn't even remember doing it before, but I'd heard it before. So I look it up on my phone. Boom. All right, that's it. And I sit down and doing it, and I had a state of stillness. Oh, calm.
So those that
And
don't know, can you explain what a Kriya is?
Yeah, well, Kriya means work. And in the Kundalini lineage, a Kriya is a practice that helps one access a certain state of consciousness. And so then they can come through different types of purposes. Kundalini yoga is really beautiful for this. It can be to help strengthen the endocrine system. It can help bring more consciousness to the heart. It can help clean and clear the aura.
Mm-hmm.
So, uh, generally, someone who's in a regular practice with Kundalini Yoga is doing a sadhana each day, which is the daily spiritual practice, and it involves a kriya. And the kriyas are usually um, built in stages of 40. So it's common to do a kriya set for 40 days
Mm-hmm.
and to help enable that state of consciousness. And Sudarshan Chakra kriya particularly helps to align a being into their higher self. This is the personal experience. And it helps to rid karma. Karma is just obstacles in the way of aligning into the highest state of consciousness possible.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts to just go through that stuff, and it helps to keep the being, the electromagnetic field and the central nervous system into a state of peace and balance, so that it can attain more light.
Mm-hmm.
So that ended up being my anchor into the merging into the Kundalini yoga path, the Kundalini yoga identity. So holding like that kept me in place. So Darshan Chakra Kriya made it so that I could make that transition into becoming a Kundalini yogi full time, which meant wearing white every day and a turban.
Mm-hmm.
And so I shifted into that practice, and it just that was it. That was the curriculum for the time to teach Kundalini yoga, to maintain the identity as a Kundalini yoga teacher. So, and also still practice with the medicine. And then yeah, and
And
then
that was
on
that
March,
was actually around the time when we met.
that was when we met. Yep, that was
And
when
it's
we
so,
met.
it's so interesting because you were dressed as the Love Wizard when I met you,
Right.
and you rolled up on a bike with all lights on it, with a couple other people that I knew, and it was the heart of COVID when we weren't supposed to gather, and we just had an awesome night, and you and I started talking, and I remember you saying, "Yeah, I'm into men's work," and I'm like, "Yeah, me too," and I'm like, "Yeah, I do Kundalini yoga," and you're like, "Oh yeah, me too," and then I'm like, "Did we just become best friends?" And it was like, "Yep."
Yeah, man, it was great. It was so beautiful how that happened. It was really nice to come into your alignment and find someone who is there was so much alignment that we got to share once we met, and so many things opened during the pandemic
Hmm.
because of that community down there, and then being able to teach and gosh, co-create in that way. That was one of the most beautiful periods of time. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and then that ended up, I went full into that and under the medicine path. I ended up down in Tulum, not far after that.
Which is Mexico, right?
Tulum, Mexico, which is
Hmm.
uh, of all the places I've ever been in the world, there's no place more transformationally powerful than Tulum.
Mm.
It is, it is this that location challenges everyone in such a synergistic, powerful way. It's similar to like what the effects that someone can have when they go to like a Burning Man or something, but it's like an everyday thing there. Totally different vibe, but similar type of like of expedited transformation.
Hmm.
Yeah, I ended up down there, and then there was on March 22nd, 2022. No, it was February 22nd, 2022. I was in a plant medicine ceremony that was one of the most like uh terrifying that I'd ever experienced. It was like the level of spiritual attacks were so strong that I just held on for dear life. And after that ceremony, that was when I committed myself to Jesus.
Mm.
And one of the things I learned in studying, because once the spiritual path opens, then it's like once the plant comes out of the ground, and on its first awakening and peeks its head, it is like doing anything it can to find the light. It just wants to bloom.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seeks it. And essentially that's what happens to a being. Like, so from the moment that I awoken in that yoga path, that was me coming out of the soil. It was
Mm-hmm.
saying, boom, God exists. There's the light, there's the sun. And then it goes through, and it's meandering through the different transgressions and the seasons, and there could be there's winter where it wilts and gets cold and thinks this maybe it's dead, and then it comes back even stronger. So this is that became the next chapter where I was down there, and it grows with more and more force. It has limbs and starts, and then maybe other flowers come from this flower. So I'm studying Ram Dass, and Ram Dass planted the seed that the guru does not have to be in the body. So I'm also at the same time I'm starting to learn Sikh, like the Sikh path, because Kundalini yoga is merged with the Sikh path.
Mm-hmm.
And the Sikhs go the path of the Guru. And the path of the Guru means to follow a being that has awakened fully to the light and love of God. So they're a full expression, and they speak from that truth. So they're a vessel speaking the truth, and they can basically help the student awaken in the same
Mm-hmm.
way by passing that light on. So I'm sitting there, and at this time, like grandmother ayahuasca was really as my guru, because most people probably, I don't want to speak for everyone, but it seems like a lot of people that go into medicine work with grandmother Aya, they end up hearing her, and maybe it's their first experience like hearing a spirit. And she's not exclusive to the ceremony space. So a relationship developed with her, and she started to guide me in my diet and studies and teachings. And at the same time there was this sort of natural something else. Was like I was really wanting to have a guru in the body,
Mm.
or a guru that was like a human.
Mm-hmm.
And then Ramdas said that the guru doesn't need to be in the body.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, okay. So I started to have more of a relationship with Jesus in the celestial realm, just communicating, praying, like feeling his presence, and really learned how to do that through the experience with grandmother ayahuasca, because that's a like a tangible experience. There's no like guessing, like, okay, I definitely hear the spirit,
Mm-hmm.
and she's beautiful and amazing. So then after that really tough ceremony, I made the commitment to Jesus, and then there was a 30-day period of waiting until I really felt like I could surrender. Because opening to the guru means full surrender. It means full service to the guru. It means it's full trust. It gives away everything to them. Like, what do I eat? What do I dress? Where do I go? And it gives everything. The whole life is given to the guru. So yeah, then on March 22nd in my apartment, um, all everything led, and I just broke down and crying, and I proclaimed Jesus as my Lord and Savior. And probably a lot of people out there might cringe because it resonates with Christianity, and Jesus has nothing to do with Christianity. Jesus is a master of retaining the light, as a master of enlightenment, a master of this experience, and is accessible to any being at any time that calls on him, who and he will be their teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, and then the key with going into guruship is to open fully. So the more one can open, the more that they can teach. And it basically becomes being a total student. And then I committed myself to just listening to him. So I hopped into the channel of consciousness with Christ. That went into a 40-day consecration. So consecration is an opportunity to show devotion to the master. So I opened a consecration practice of prayer every day for 40 days. And then he guided me to open a consecration to his mother, Mother Mary. And both of them started to guide me. And from then on, everything came before them. Eating, sleeping, anything was a prayer. And I at that point, that was actually when consciousness started to recognize consciousness in the body. So that was really the moment where there was a surrender from the mind and ego into service to the light and love in the form of Christ and Jesus and Mother Mary.
So I have a
Then,
question real quick, if you don't mind. So when you say the consciousness came into the body, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
yeah, so essentially what occurs is most of the life before this happens this happens unconsciously. It's a habit. Basically, each being has been programmed habitually, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's normal. It's part of the survival of the race of humans is, and then also that's also part of the story. It's beautiful. So most of what's happening is there's some sort of identification with the body and form. Like I am this person, I do this job, I'm a man, I'm a woman. And then when a person goes into guruship, the intention is they're saying this vessel is ready to release any sort of identification of the illusion and merge itself into the true reality, which is the kingdom of heaven or eternal life or Buddha nature, Christ consciousness. It's the awakened being. So they go into a state of self-realization that they actually are the creator.
Hmm.
It's not that they are the creator; it's that they're of the creator, and the creator is living through the being. There's no
Like a
separation.
fractal of the creator, maybe.
Right, it's a fractal. And a really nice visualization is like a tree, and the tree has apples on it. So what's going on for most people is there an apple on the tree, and they're like, "I'm an apple on the tree."
Hmm.
But then what happens is all of a sudden the apple's sitting there meditating, and it says, "Ah, I feel connected to something bigger," and it starts to work up the stem. And each being has a stem. And ours are invisible to the mostly invisible to most people's eyes. And that stem is connected to the source of of creation. So it'll start to work up the stem, and it goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm connected to a branch." And like, I not only am I connected to a branch, I'm connected to a limb. Whoa, I'm not only connected to a limb, I'm connected to the tree. And it goes, "Whoa, I'm the tree. That means I'm
Hmm.
every apple." And then it goes further and goes, "I'm not only the tree is connected to the earth, and I am the earth, and the earth is in the sky. I am the sky. I'm everything."
Hmm.
Oh man, and then it sits from that position. So it becomes awakened from that position. Um,
Mm.
and so, but that hadn't fully happened yet. What had happened was I had recognized the tree essentially, which Christ was emblematic of the tree. And so and I'm like the apple learning how to embody Christ consciousness, or in this case, like tree consciousness, like love
Right,
consciousness.
right.
And he's the teacher, he's the master.
Hmm.
And so I surrender everything there. And basically, that's a surrender to the mind. The mind still exists, but it's like it runs everything through the filter of Christ first, which is essentially then filtered through the higher self. So it was like basically learning how to do everything over again. It was like, okay, before I do anything, before I go to the bathroom, I ask the master, like, "Master." It was and anyone who's listening may be like, the ego goes, "No," because it thinks it's the master. And it
Mm.
says, "No, no, do whatever I want, whenever I want to do it." And that's how most of the world's ran. And this is saying, "No, we did it your way." That was a funny, and it was constantly suffering.
Hmm.
This person has something that I'm ready to receive and align into. I'm ready to merge. Yoga means to merge, to union. So this body, this consciousness is ready to merge with God.
Hmm.
This guru, the path of the guru, is the way for this vessel. So the guru is the light. I follow the light. So it no longer chooses the ego and the mind as the master, and it chooses the light in the representation of a celestial guru, which in this case with Jesus, but it could be anyone. It could be Krishna, it can be Kali, any sort of celestial being that has awakened to the light and love of God and love light of God expressing through it, that's a master. And
Mm-hmm.
the master is and when Jesus revealed himself in the Kundalini or in the yoga in the ayahuasca, he was saying, and my deeper knowing knew he's the way.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a little while to eradicate the ego enough to be able to surrender. And it's like, okay, teacher, I'm ready. And there's a saying like the the teacher will arrive when the student is ready. So I was ready at that point to open, and
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 yeah, the Way of the Mastery is an amazing book that channels Yeshua or Jesus, right? And this is this book in particular that you mentioned in the beginning of the podcast is one of the one of the ways that people can connect to this frequency and these deeper teachings, right?
right, those are next level teachings. And so yeah, basically at that point I'm in, and this is accessible for anyone who opens their heart fully. I'm listening. Jesus and Mother Mary are setting the curriculum with the higher self, and they started that ended up me going down to the jungle. I went into the jungle and studied with the Huni Queen Kashinawa. I thought I was done with medicine. I drank way more, and I studied with the Santo Daime. Yeah, I remember just being like, I'm done with the medicine, and then yeah, and then that ended up leading into me going and living in the Sikh ashram and studying Sikhism in and then also becoming Guru Tudden, which was a really challenging period of time where I adopted a spiritual name while living in the ashram. And then that ended up leading into Kriya Yoga initiation with in the lineage of Mahavatar Babaji and Yogananda,
Yogananda
which I
Paramahansa.
ended up doing with you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went into a really deep study of Patanjali's and the eight limbs of yoga and started living that way. And then also the Essenes, studying really deeply the Essenes, going through some initiations in water fasting the way that the Essenes did, and the prayers to the angels, and eventually went into a very very long deep dive, and still is happening with the Law of One teachings. And of all the spiritual teachings that I've learned, those ones are the most illuminating, along with Patanjali's The Way of Mastery, and then the words of Jesus from the Bible, just his words. He really taught it in a masterful class. So then that eventually led into moving to Austin, and in Austin I met another woman who was a Brahma Kumari monk for 9 years.
Mm.
And the Brahma Kumaris, they meditate, like the real like advanced ones. They meditate for 8 hours a day with their eyes open on the love of God. They
Wow.
meditate on love with their eyes open. And I had never seen eyes like this, and I had actually never been with a person that was as still as she was. Like
Mm.
even when she was talking, moving, she emanated the stillness.
Mm.
She also, yeah, so when I would sit with her, we would just go into stillness.
Mm-hmm.
Then, in the presence of her and in a unified field of meditation, uh, the the opening to presence locked in. It locked in, and essentially, what happens is that this is what happened for this body is the channel for celestial communication is where all communication from source enters. And just as a tree, like let's say that this is a tree, each branch can be a celestial master or angel. And wherever they're at, they have a different perspective from the tree. So in order for someone to talk about teachings from the south, then it would access a master on the south side of the
Mm.
tree.
Mm-hmm.
And God is watching. So there was one time where I lost a little bit of track, where I'm like, I remember going to Jesus saying, Jesus, I don't know if I can do this, I'm struggling. Is it okay if go and speak to God. And Jesus is like, yeah, yeah, go speak to God. Okay. So I reach out to God. I'm like, God, I'm really challenged right now. Can you please help me? And God's like, listen to your teacher. And I'm like, ah. So I go back to Jesus, and Jesus is like, listen to your heart. I'm like, oh. I go back to God. God's like, listen to your teacher. I'm like, oh. Go back to Jesus, listen to your heart. So I listen to my heart. So I find the masters teach from listening to the heart. However, a different master has a different way of teaching. And so what happened there is that I realized that I really felt in the system there is no separation. This is just one source speaking from different perspectives to the state of the being that is able to emulate consciousness at that moment. So it's and and each one, so as Jesus is teaching, Jesus is learning. So it's a teach, learn, teach relationship. As a master of like Tai Chi is teaching, it's same, and it's all ran through like one thing when the celestial realms is that it's based off of free will. That's a quintessential thing. So the higher self had already made some agreements before the incarnation happened
Hmm.
that and so the higher self was like, Jesus, you're the master. When I go in, there's gonna and the angels, the guardian angels are there, so they're all accessible. And once that happened, then the relationship between higher self and master started to merge. So all of a sudden, Christ was like, I am you, you are me. And like, it's like, whoa, another ego, like, ah, like, and the oneness starts to come through. And then there's a certain level, there was a freak out moment where it hit for a long enough period of time where the body realized that it's actually possible to live in the world in complete state of consciousness. No deviation into the mind. The mind can be accessed as a tool like a wrench or a screwdriver, but then it's put down. It completely identifies with the mind and it identifies with the I am. And the core function that happened was the mind was saying you can't exist without me. You won't go to the bathroom, you won't work, you won't have any money, you won't do anything. You'll just sit around. And that's not the case. Once the consciousness activates in, it becomes pure awareness. And from pure awareness is total flow, total unity with life. There's no resistance anymore. And one of the images that comes to mind is in Finding Nemo, where the turtle is in the current,
Hmm.
and so the turtle is like a master, he's a wizard, and he's talking to Nemo's dad, and he's like, "Hey man, check this out, bro." And and the dad goes in and is like, "Whoa, whoa!" And this is what it's like: is essentially the master shows the way to the natural current and someone leaves the floundering of like how do I get there, but Jesus eventually just very carefully guided the one known as Augie into the current. And at first it was like, I can't do this, okay, and then it was like a little bit more, and then pretty soon it's like it's very relaxing. It's like surfing. It's like someone who's like, okay, so consciousness is riding the wave. How the heck am I going to do that? So there's all this practice and like learning how to get out, and then you got to learn how to, and then you got to time the wave and stuff like that. Then you get to,
Hmm.
and and then eventually one gets on the wave, and, like, and then they fall off,
Hmm.
and and then they're like, actually, and then pretty soon now they're riding the wave, and then once they are the wave, then they realize like, oh, not only am I riding the wave, I am the wave. I
Hmm.
am the board. I'm everything. And there's this deep like sense of peace and relaxation and flow that enters in. And so that leads to where things are now is that once that kind of freak out happened, the freak out was the mind had the mind had been seen. The conscious, the observer saw its final like trick, illusion, unconscious thing that it was saying was, which is basically like saying, you can't exist without me.
Mm.
And I sat down in meditation and I said, I'm going to stay in a state of consciousness And I'm not going to move until consciousness moves me, until the will and the power and light and love of God actually moves this vessel. And I laid there and I just stayed in that state of bliss with God. And eventually God moved me. So it was eventually I I surfed the wave. And from there on, it was like, you told me I couldn't surf. I can surf, brother. And I don't, and thank you for all your teachings. You're still there. I'll use you when it's time, but you don't direct the world anymore. This
Mm.
does. But that also meant that everything else was going to go away. And that's where you meet me at this point. Uh, the one known as Augie G, consciousness flowing through this vessel, is moving into a full state of, it was basically been a practice of like, okay, let's get up and surf, let's meditate, and then fall off the board. Now I could surf for a while. Now it's like, let's just catch the everlasting wave.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you for sharing that, brother. That's profound. Your journey's been absolutely incredible. It's been such an honor to witness you in the years that we've known each other and all the stages and different evolutions of Augie G. And
Likewise, Peter G.
thank you, brother. Yeah, it's been amazing. And I just have one question that arose. Can you share a little bit about what you physically experienced in the body, or what was it that you said consciousness moved your body? What did that feel like? How did you know it was consciousness?
Yeah, so there's a really beautiful teaching from Bashar, and essentially the body is the conduit for connection to source. And the body can feel truth. The body feels truth.
Hmm.
It'll register through the whole field where it's a full yes. So typically what people call meditation is actually just concentration. So they're either thinking about a mantra or they're thinking about their breath, and those are useful. Those are very useful to help still the mind and help still the body. And what was learned recently is actually meditation is no thought. And so what started happening was it would just go into the abyss, the dark, the black. It's just black. It's
Hmm.
just, there's nothing. There's no thought. And if anyone can hold this for a second, just by saying like no thought, and the mind will go black for a moment, no thought. And then the next thought that comes in is the ego. So now the observer has locked itself in. Okay. So now the observer knows itself, which is the self. The observer is the I am, the consciousness. There's just one being. So the being tunes into the awareness that's always there. That was the beginning. There's no. It's the alpha. There's no beginning or end. It's the infinity. And then it goes into a state of nothingness. Now, from all nothing, there is no nothingness, but it's the perceived nothingness, the unmanifested. So it goes into that state, and it just rests in beingness, which is the most calm, blissful state. And it starts to, there's like a perimeter where the mind's wanting to come in and sabotage it. It's like a little kid where it's like, hey, or like it'll plant some kind of thought, and each thing is met with acceptance and love, and just saying, nothingness, no mind. And so eventually what occurs is the mind then becomes essentially the ocean of consciousness, which is the infinite ocean of awareness. And from that infinite ocean, all of a sudden, there's no waiting. It's just sitting there. It just happens. There's a release and waiting. It's just, there's a death to like what's next, that concept or what do we want to do. No, just being. And then from that being state, all of a sudden, and this is where the fallacy of the mind dies, something arises and it's a full yes. And it's like, it's a mounting wave. I mean, the mounting wave could be like bathroom.
Mm.
It's like, mm, ah. if this is God, all powerful God, consciousness, the creator. God wants me to go to the bathroom. God wants his vessel to go to the bathroom. It'll move it to the bathroom. It'll move it. So it sits and sits and sits and just keeps surrendering deeper and deeper and deeper into the nothingness. And then it's completely immersed in nothing. And all of a sudden, one observes themselves. They don't think like, I'm going to get up now and go to the bathroom. It just happens. It goes, it
Mm.
moves the self.
Mm-hmm.
So that is when someone has now entered into the flow. They're in the flow. And then eventually what will happen is they'll start to connect those flow states for longer periods of time. So they just got up on the board on a surfboard. They did it and then they fell off. That's
Mm-hmm.
when they break, when the mind comes back in.
Mm-hmm.
So the what would happen is more and more time would carve away where I could surf for longer. I could stay into this state of consciousness for a longer period of time, and then eventually, and it would move. So things are happening, but Augie is no longer the one who thinks it's Augie in the mind and the body. Augie has now merged with creation and is now watching from a merged standpoint. So it basically become the tree
Mm-hmm.
of the branch of all creation, right? So it's watching it from that perspective, and it no longer identifies with the world of form,
Mm-hmm.
and it's constantly in a state of peace and bliss. No matter if emotions or anything, it's observing each motion, each thought, from that place. And once that happens, it's just natural. Like it just there's no like going back. Like
Mm-hmm.
once consciousness sees the ego and the mind, it will go deeper and deeper into that awareness naturally.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that.
So yeah, that's the feeling. Bashar talks about the full yes, and every single moment. Essentially, what he's teaching is learn how to feel consciousness moving the heart into each inspired action, and get strong at that. Build your faith, build your will into that, and then eventually it just happens. It's a really beautiful teaching because that's essentially he's teaching how to access consciousness,
Mm.
because
Beautiful.
the full yes in every moment is that's your alignment, that's the dharma, and the more and more and more people practice that, the better and better they get.
Following the highest excitement in every
The
moment.
highest excitement, which is what the way that I express it, or this gets expressed through this one, is the full yes moment.
Mm-hmm.
So each moment is a full yes moment.
And full yes is mind, body, spirit aligning together because it could be a yes in the body, but it may not be for the spirit or the mind, right?
Yeah, there's one caveat. So one of the things that I found, that one of the things that's emerged is that each person's ability to feel a full yes is a little bit different, which makes sense to me because each person's a snowflake.
Mm-hmm.
There is one thing that is fairly standard in each human vessel, is that there is an energy center of the chakras that moves through.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that it works in this vessel is that the root chakra and let's start over. Sorry. Yeah, so it goes from the way that it goes from mind, heart, and body. And body's felt in the gut. So people will say gut feeling. That's just one aspect of the physical form. So like I got to follow my gut. Well, that might just be the mind talking to the stomach, bypassing the heart. So
Mm.
ideally, all three of those lined up, and it feels like an exhilarating yes. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's the type of yes that energetically feels like a dance, like when like a little kid like gets the food that they like and they do like a yes dance.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that type of dance felt viscerally in the body. Like, this is a full yes,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for
and so
me,
that's and what can happen. Mhm.
I was just gonna say, for
Yeah,
me,
speak
I
on that one.
feel
How's it?
like chills going through my body as confirmation. It's like a wave of energy that rushes through, and it's like, okay, that's my yes, you know?
That's it. So there's probably going to be, or maybe it already exists. There was some work that was done with it's kinesiology or something like this. It's basically muscle testing, right?
Kinesiology, yeah.
It's useful. Kinesiology, yeah. It's useful to go into a muscle testing practice, and then there's teachers that teach muscle testing with crystals, or David Hawkins does it with like an arm of another person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually possible to do right now. It's
Mm-hmm.
just you can do it in the without the body has the potential to feel it without any sort of external validation of it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it feels alive to share like how that activated for me.
Yeah,
Really,
I'd love to hear
is
that.
there enough clock time for that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and there's not a crystal with me right now, but a crystal can be held from a pendulum. There's pendulum crystals on a hand, and then the way that it worked for me is I say my name, my born name, and I'll say it entire and my the name that I was given when I was born, and the crystal will automatically move in one direction. That is a yes, right? And as it's moving, feel in the body the yes. Like, what does a yes feel like in the body? What does a full yes feel like for me? And anyone who has like everybody, most people know their born name, the name they were given when they were born, and so that's a benchmark to go. This is a full yes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then say a different name, like it's any random name, like Dilbert Skittlefish, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then it's like, okay, that's a no. And the crystal will move in a different direction. And that's a no. And then so feel the no in the body. Like this is a no. Now it becomes the practice of only working through yeses.
Mm-hmm.
And only working through yeses is void of the logical mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the harder things to release. So, like, and there's all kinds of decisions to be made through the day. When one gets, basically, it teaches one to become completely present in each moment, like, and not just reactive. It becomes responsive.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, then it becomes like even as I go up to leave here, I can open the left door or the right door. I can use my left hand or my right hand. There's different ways. It's tuning into like what's the full yes in each and every moment.
Mm-hmm.
Food, is this a full yes? And just operating from full yeses into that trust, and
And that's
that starts to
also,
awaken.
yeah, that's
Mhm.
also a presence practice, like a very powerful one.
Yeah, because and this is also a really beautiful teaching, but from Eckhart Tolle. But the kingdom of heaven is here right now. It's a dimensional access point in the now moment. So as someone becomes now, which is no mind, automatically becomes now. It's just now.
Mm-hmm.
And helping also in the no mind is to bring awareness to constant awareness to the body, the breath, the texture of the air. All of a sudden this becomes now, and from now all exists in the unmanifested world, and then each moment reveals. So in that path of faith, it's the step will appear moment to moment. It's a complete life of faith. And it doesn't even become faith, it just becomes knowing after a while, because the faith muscle becomes so strong, and the will to unite with consciousness is so strong that it just becomes it.
And how would you connect intuition to that?
Yeah, intuition is it. the
Mm-hmm.
only the only part is that some people are confusing one aspect of self as intuition. So for example, if someone's just taking information from the gut, and they're not going through some sort of check-in process, either through like a celestial master, then because it can be refined, and intuition is a channel of information coming through. And so it's useful to go into meditation, and especially with like an angel or a celestial master, or someone who's highly present, to help tune in. And then there's a deep knowing. Like full yeses is a deep knowing where it's like this is it, and there's like you just know.
Mhm.
You just know.
Mhm.
But there can be some tricky stuff with the mind. The mind can be tricky, so it's useful to tune in and go through different check-in processes.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm. Well,
and then
brother.
eventually after that, then it's there. Yeah,
Okay.
is it feeling?
Okay. Yeah, brother, this has been such an honor to have you on, especially at this profound moment in time for you in this journey, in this new, it feels like a new book from my perspective, not just a new chapter. And I'm so honored to have had you on and to call you one of my best friends and to continue to witness whatever's going to evolve through this unknown.
There's a saying in Mayan in Lakesh, and
Hmm.
you are the other me.
Hmm.
So it's yeah, it's a really beautiful spot to for like two hearts anahata yum to merge together in that space as one. So there's a lot of joy in the field around being able to witness Peter G and the expression of the light and love of God coming through the vessel and how that's showing up in the world, and a lot of gratitude in the teachings and wisdom that I've been able to learn from you, brother.
Thank you,
So thank
brother.
you so much.
Thank you so much, man. I love you so much, and maybe we'll do a part two down the line. We'll
Okay,
see.
we'll see how it all see hop on that wave together. Hey, bro,
Yeah.
bro, again.
Yeah, exactly. All right, man. Until next time, brother. Sending you lots of love.